Let's make sure we don't give him any real power.
Hi everyone, welcome to Priority Holder, and today we'll be playing Colorless Eldrazi in the Timeless format. So this is what I've been trading for. I've played like a million different Chalice of the Void decks, and this day is finally here. We have Ancient Tomb. So it's a soul land that lets us play a turn 1 Chalice X equals 1, and if you run Ugin's Labyrinth, you have even more chances of getting that turn 1 Chalice X equals 1. So Eldrazi seemed like a natural shell. It's like the low-hanging fruit right now because we also have the Eldrazi Temple soul land, which helps us get like really early Thought-Knot Seers and Glaring Fleshrakers and stuff like that, which is also like a wombo combo with like Kozilek's command. So Eldrazi just seems really strong, and then of course we get to leverage Strip Mine, which we can pull ahead a little bit, knock out some mana sources from the opponent, and just rush them down. So let's jump into some games. Alright, this is a pretty great hand. Ugin's Labyrinth plus a 7-drop to tuck under it means we'll have some explosive mana. We'll get to that one ring in no time. Alright, thought we were going to eat a discard spell for a second, but it's a Phantasmal Shieldback, which is basically always indicative of a Flare of Denial deck, heavy counter spells. So we're going to tuck our Nulldrifter under Ugin's Labyrinth. Now, in this new like Strip Mine meta, you have to be a little careful. Like Ugin's Labyrinth is probably the most vulnerable of your lands because it's like a 2-for-1 if they nab that one. But I wanted to get, the Labyrinth set up in the case of hand disruption. So I'm going to explicitly tap the Cavern of Souls here. If you use it for Colorless, which is sometimes important in Eldrazi decks, you don't get the can't be countered clause. So I just wanted to make sure I got that, especially in this specific matchup. So opponent's going to brainstorm and shuffle, and they're going to surveil for good measure. They like what they see. Alright, so they're actually a 3-color deck, and our creature's going to eat a swords. Sort of annoying. Would love to get some like Eldrazi spawn, but have to move on. So I'm not going to toss a 1-ring out into open like mana drain mana. And that's the beauty of like these new fancy lands we have. We have Eldrazi Temples and Ancient Tombs. Like we can actually power out stuff pretty quickly. So we're actually going to be able to play Nulldrifter hardcast next turn. So just turn 4 hardcast Nulldrifter, no big deal. Alright, the opponent did get a Tamiyo in play though. So we're going to drop the Eldrazi Temple, and I just let the auto tapper do its thing, and it looks like you can see the purple glow. It looks like they did it correctly. So the opponent attempts to mana drain. Well, they're probably just using it as a ritual. They knew we had the cavern, and it makes sense exactly why they do it. So they're going to feed mana into a treasure cruise. They still end up delving a whole lot, so let's see if they can actually make use of all that colorless mana. It does flip their Tamiyo. Alright, another shield back, another land. I mean, like they could crank off another treasure cruise. Alright, so they didn't really use the mana a whole lot. So I'm going to play Ancient Tomb and move to combat and going to attack Tamiyo, and it's going to get shrunk down, and we get an Annihilator trigger. This is a mistake by the opponent, so they should have done that pre-combat because now they're still going to have to sacrifice something. That is, unless they wanted to sacrifice the shield back to draw a card, so it could entirely have been on purpose. Should point that out. So going to use Ancient Tomb and just auto tap to get the right. The lands get a little funky like with the auto tapper sometimes. Alright, so this is going to be a Flare of Denial. I didn't want to feed a 1-ring into a mana drain that early on in the game, but I'm happy that they used up their Flare of Denial. Like we have some things like Kozilek's command in the 1-ring that Cavern of Souls doesn't help, so we have to chew through their Flare of Denials at some point. Alright, Tamiyo is currently unopposed, which is a little annoying. Alright, opponent's going to crack their fetch. I thought they're going to get like a Mystic Sanctuary for a second, but they just wanted to add a card for a Treasure Cruise. And this is the power of Warping Wail right here. I'm going to attempt to counter their Treasure Cruise and just really cut off their card flow. Alright, so opponent's going to fetch in response. They get an island. Alright, so they're going to mana drain our Warping Wail. But once again, we're just trying to run them out of answers and then draw our Eldrazi and punch them through the counterspells with Cavern of Souls, So, and that's one thing to note. So we are a Chalice of the Void deck. Because of Cavern, like if you do like Chalice X equals 2, for example, you could still power your It That Heralds the End through a Chalice with Cavern of Souls. So you have to keep that interaction in mind. Gonna hard cast another Nulldrifter. Now the Tamiyo is getting up there in loyalty. Like, it is tempting to try and like flood the board soon. What I'd end up doing instead is playing Strip Mine and attacking their white source. That way, if they have another swords or a way to like, you know, use Tamiyo to buy back the swords, then they can't take care of Nulldrifter. And so, alright, so I'm just checking there. So I drew Chalice, so I'm trying to make sure what's the best number to put Chalice on. And I decide just to start off with Chalice X equals 1. That shuts down future swords, it shuts down brainstorms. Alright, so in response, the opponent is going to cling to dust. I did consider Kozilek's commanding my own graveyard to fizzle their card draw, but decided I might want to use the mana a different way. Just going to attack him with Nulldrifter, see if we could take some loyalty off Tamiyo. Alright, so the opponent's just going to feed it to the shield back. They're trying to find some, maybe like, I don't know if they run like Toxic Deluge or Damnation. That's probably what they're fishing for, because their removal probably doesn't line up very well with our Nulldrifters. So I use an Eldrazi Temple for it that heralds the end, but that means it can be countered by the mana drain. So that is a little unfortunate, but so I'm trying to figure out what to do, and I almost just passed, like, you know what, this is like as shields down as they're going to get for a while, so I'm going to resolve a One Ring. Now our Ancient Tombs are eating our life total, so I have to like just be a little mindful of that. But the opponent, thanks to like our Annihilator on Nulldrifter, is just like hemorrhaging resources right now. Alright, so they did find a new white source. Alright, so they're plussing Tamiyo. Now they attempt to swords down on Nulldrifter, but Chalice has us covered. So I don't know if that was like just a mistake or if they're trying to charge up the graveyard for Treasure Cruise eventually, you know, but they can't be too happy about our Chalice X equals 1. Alright, so I'm going to activate the One Ring to see what we find before moving on. Another Strip Mine means we can clear out the white source again. This time I want uncounterability for it that heralds the end. So now Nulldrifter is a little beefier. Going to attack into Tamiyo. Just want to take Tamiyo down. Tamiyo just has too much utility and is just threatening. Alright, so the opponent is going to subtlety in response, but they end up giving up right there because they knew we had a million cards in hand and they were in big trouble. So on to the next game. Turn 1 Dragon's Rage Channeler to see if they have any Mishra's Baubles. No, alright, so our Devourer goes off and end up taking a Nulldrifter just to get some more action. We already have a blue source in hand also, so we're going to tuck the Devourer, and against a Dragon's Rage Channeler deck, you just love to see a turn 1 Chalice of the Void. Like, that's just incredibly strong. Like, sometimes you play turn 1 Chalice against these kind of decks, and they just concede. So this one instead considers, and they still get the cast trigger off Dragon's Rage Channeler, so they might have been trying to power up towards Delirium by firing directly into the Chalice. Alright, so they're going to fetch and then Surveil. Didn't manage to make it to Delirium, so they're just going to crash in for 1. And decide, you know, just to take, because the thing is, Dragon's Rage Channeler still provides a ton of value in play. Like, if they ever hit Delirium and the Surveils it gives, like, it's just a powerful creature. So I'm going to play Cavern on Eldrazi, which, you know, against the blue decks, it's going to be super strong. So let's see if the opponent has anything. Alright, Expressive Iteration is pretty good, and as the opponent resolves that, if you enjoy seeing Eldrazi and Strip Mines and Ancient Tombs, please Petrifying Metal or the like button. Alright, so they did find a 0 with it, Mishra's Bauble, which is really strong. And this is exactly why I took out the Dragon's Rage Channel. They would have had so many Surveils to like try and dig their way out of this. Because like Sink into Stupor, Bouncing Chalice could like unshackle them for long enough to really go off, you know, so here's the question. We have a Strip Mine, but we also have a Nulldrifter. And so I decide after playing Eldrazi Temple to just play Nulldrifter Evoke. I figured like we're pretty dang safe with Chalice X equals 1, so I wanted to find some action. However, I just basically turned it to a bunch of lands, so not the best. We do have a Devourer under our Labyrinth we can get eventually. Alright, so opponent fires off another Expressive Iteration. Does find a land. Alright, they're going to crack their fetch right away and see what they do with it. Alright, and they're going to cycle Lorien Revealed. Alright, they're probably realizing that we're a Strip Mine deck, and so they're trying to lock up some lands. Alright, and at this point I decide, you know what? let's just fully lock them out. I'm going to Chalice X equals 2. That shuts down mana drains, shuts down expressive iteration. It should shut down most of their stuff, and I'm going to start the strip mine process now. So like we don't really have like any presence on board, but we have them like pretty thoroughly locked out. So the opponent puts an expressive iteration on the stack, but our Chalice X equals 2 is going to take care of that, and that's enough for the opponent. So love to see it. On to the next one. I don't think we even played any creatures that game, so going to lead with the Devourer trigger. Alright, opponent has Starting Town Ragavan. Alright, and so Devourer is going to go off. I end up taking a Warping Wail because that's a clean answer to Ragavan. And we're going to be able to turn 1 Chalice. Now, I was so excited about the turn 1 Chalice. Usually, like in the past, you'd always want to do this against the Ragavan decks, but I think the fact they're playing Starting Town was a huge tell that I should have just Warping Wailed the Ragavan. And you'll see exactly why, because we're in a different world now with like ancient tombs and Eldrazi temples, because now all of a sudden I let them get a turn 2 Soaring Myco spawn, which cast trigger puts an untapped land to play, so they're going to strip our Ugin's Labyrinth, and we are like in huge trouble now. So now we're facing down 5 power, some of which is Ragavan, which is going to be generating treasures, so just a nightmare scenario unfolding, but this is a good learning experience. This is day 1 of the format right here that I'm recording this. Day 1 of the Strip Mine Ancient Tomb format, I should say. So we do manage to get a second land into play, and trying to decide what to do, end up passing. Let's see what the opponent has. Kozilek's command. So the reason I mentioned Starting Town should have been a tell, because that's a colorless source, and Ragavan, there's no reason to really play Starting Town in a Ragavan deck unless you're also dealing with the Eldrazi stuff, you know, because Starting Town helps cast Kozilek's command, things like that, or kick Soaring Myco spawn. So, alright, Thought-Knot Seer, we're just getting pulverized right here, and that Heralds at the end. So at first, didn't realize right away that I was facing an Eldrazi deck, but now it's abundantly clear that that's what happened, and we just got ran over. So on to the next one. Alright, this hand, you know, has a Labyrinth, has a Nulldrifter, so that's pretty strong. Alright, opponent's going to crack Windswept Heap and play a Delighted Halfling. So Delighted Halflings also give off alarm bells now because it's a colorless source, so we could be facing a colorless deck right here as well. I'm not going to mess around with it. I'm just going to Warping Wail. Just not going to let them, you know, it's just a classic Bolt the Bird situation, you know. Don't want to give them too much mana to start with. Alright, Ocelot Pride and Deathrite Shaman. I think Deathrite Shaman's a lot stronger now in the Strip Mine meta, both to accelerate stuff like, oh man, what's it called? Ice Till something. Anyway, like a 1-card Strip Mine lock, and to break up Strip Mine locks and stuff like that. So I'm going to Kozilek's command. I'm going to take out Deathrite Shaman. Now, I could have done something fancy where I exiled the Ocelot Pride and the land in their graveyard to try and shut down Deathrite's utility. I decided that was a little too fancy, because if they just pulled another fetch land, then it just doesn't matter, you know. So got rid of the Deathrite Shaman. Now, one thing to note, the opponent is playing a brush land over there. Now, that could be a budget consideration, like just how many wild cards they have, but usually it means that they're splashing colorless, you know. So especially that we saw a Delighted Halfling earlier. So decided just to play Thought-Knot Seer. There is an argument for One Ring, but I just really wanted to get on board. But the opponent had the swords right away for the Thought-Knot Seer, so depending on what they draw, we might be able to nab it for good, but the opponent lucked out and ripped a land, so we ended up not stealing their card for good. Alright. So the opponent's going to crash in. Ocelot Pride is going to start doing its thing, but we'd be able to sort of like slow them down so much that it doesn't seem like they're making much forward progress. I decided to build up some, like, the longer you keep Glaring Fleshraker out, the better. It just keeps generating more and more and more value. So we're going to take down the Ocelot Pride, get an Eldrazi spawn. And you see me with the Strip Mine right here, like thinking about, like, you know, one, should I play it? 2, should I use it right away? And one thing of note, the opponent has a Phoenix down in play. And now it makes sense. They're a Bright Glass Gear Hulk deck. So we saw all the potent 1-drops like Deathrite, Ocelot Pride. So if I wanted to strip mine their untapped source, I should have done it with Bright Glass's ability on this. I guess, no, they would have had the mana no matter what at that point. So end up deciding not to strip mine, but we are paying for that a little bit because Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride is going off, and they're going to hit the magical 3 energy threshold. So all of a sudden took a huge turn for the worse. And so Phoenix Down is for rebuying Bright Glass Gear Hulk. So gonna play Ugin's Labyrinth. I actually realized I could hard cast Devourer of Destiny here. Now I think this is a mistake by me. I'm grabbing Bright Glass Gear Hulk because it's like the biggest creature. The most threatening creature is actually Guide of Souls because it can give their creatures evasion. So I should have gotten rid of Guide of Souls because our Devourer can rumble with their Gear Hulk, you know. Alright, so the opponent plays their own Strip Mine, and they're going to nuke our Ugin's Labyrinth, which also gets rid of our Eldrazi that was stuck under it. So now their Phoenix Down's not really great in this matchup because all of our removal is like exile removal, and so they're never going to really get anything back. In fact, that's why you see their Deathrite Shaman never really activating to like turn on Ocelot Pride, is because there's like no creatures in the graveyard. They're all exiled. So play the Fleshraker. I'm willing to sacrifice some spawns right here because the Fleshrakers are going to start going wild right now. So each one is going to generate a spawn, and each one is going to trigger off each spawn. And so the opponent is not long for this world because we're just going to machine gun them down with the Fleshrakers. So going to just activate the One Ring right here. Let's see what we have next. And Kozilek's Command. Now this is just a mistake by me right here. I was just like excited. I'm like, all right, I'm going to fire it off. However, there's a couple of problems. One, we have ring protection, so we can't use like some of the useful modes like making spawns. And two, we can just untap, crank like a full power Kozilek's Command and just machine gun them down and instant win, you know. So there wasn't really a need to use it right here, except to take down Guide of Souls, I guess, you know, if they had a way to make a bunch of... I don't know. I think that was a bad play by me right there. So opponent's going to draw, and it's just a lowly Deathrite Shaman, so... And they're going to pass to us. Now, they... Once again, I don't think there's any creatures in the graveyard, so they can't use Deathrite to gain any life. So we have a chance to just finish them off right here with just pinging from Fleshraker. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Decide to lead with Nulldrifter, just evoking it, because we're trying to cast as many spells as possible right now. So Fleshrakers are going to go off, and that represents 4 damage right there, just off 1 spell being cast. And so the Fleshraker is like a fragile creature, but you could see how cracked it is. Like if you like start stacking them up, like they really mow down the opponent quickly. And that's it. We're moving on to the next game. Alright, pretty reasonable hand. Don't have like any early plays, but we have Labyrinth, Strip Mine. So I have to see where that takes us. Alright, turn 1 Lava Spur Boots and pass. I was super confused. I'm like, what is going on over there? Lava Spur Boots. I'm going to tuck something under Ugin's Labyrinth. Would have loved to like Chalice X = 1. Basically would always love to do that, except for that one game earlier. Alright, Aether Spellbomb. Chrome Mox. And it becomes clear opponent's an Artifacts deck. So let's see what they tuck under. They tuck a, I think it's called Galvanic Blast. Anyway, the one that gets better with the Metalcraft. So I'm hesitating here because I'm like, should I like strip mine their land right now? But they still have a Chrome Mox. Anyway, it just seems long-term better just to toss a One Ring out there and get moving. I'm a little wary about throwing a Fleshraker out there knowing that they have burn spells. And it's a little more mana efficient to use the One Ring right now. But you have to be conscious of your life total when you got Ancient Tombs and One Rings going off. So, alright, so opponent's going to Emery. And now it makes sense, like the Lava Spur Boots do like really good work. They give it like a little layer of protection, and they allows them to activate Emery right away. So they're going to put Mishra's Bauble into play with Emery and pass to us. Alright, what do we do now? And the decisions get sort of tricky with this. Like even just which land to play now is like super complicated. Like, oh, do you strip mine them, or do you play Eldrazi Temple, or is it time to put an Ugin's Labyrinth? Like, it gets pretty complicated at times. with all these new lands. Decide, just now that they're sort of getting some mana, getting some things to play, I'm going to Thought-Knot Seer and just try and interfere with them a little bit. So the opponent has a Galvanic Blast and a Thought Monitor. I'm going to take the Galvanic Blast because that can just immediately shoot down Thought-Knot Seer, and I'm going to strip mine their land right here. That really is going to set them back, hopefully, from casting their creature. I mean, it does have affinity, you know, but like that's going to like really chew up their resources. All right, the opponent's cracking Spellbomb to try and... They must be desperately fishing for a land right here. All right, they're going to put Bobble into play. And... all right, they're going to pass. So they did not find a land. And I think in this new Strip Mine world, you should probably be playing a couple more lands than you used to in Timeless. Like, I know, like, I'm keeping that in mind when I build my decks. Probably adding about, like, 2 extra lands per deck. Because if you get an early Strip Mine, like, they Strip Mine you early and you just stumble on lands, like, that can just... you can just lose games like that. So, putting Fleshraker into play and, like, analyzing what to do. I want to nuke something in their graveyard with Kozilek's command. But, you know, it just takes a little while to execute. And I was trying to figure out what other mode. Like, alright, do I want a card or do I want to spawn? I'm like, alright, I want to take out something from their graveyard. And I'm doing it right now because I have a mana floating thanks to, like, the soul lands, how they work. And as I'm, like, choosing the modes, I actually am, like, just barely too slow. And I end up timing out. You could see it just sort of rush out of right there. So we lose the floating mana, and then the Kozilek's command does not happen. And we don't get rid of the spell bomb in the graveyard. So, just an unfortunate situation. So that was just user error right there. Just me moving too slowly. So the opponent's going to crack Bobble. Would have rather exiled Bobble more than Aether Spellbomb because it doesn't require any mana to get them their cards. And we have to discard the hand size. So Bobble's going to go off. Opponent's still trying to find some mana. Alright, so they did find another land. But their artifact count is like really low right now. Alright, another Mishra's Bobble's pretty clutch because they can Emery back another one. Or they can play Shadow Spear. And let's see. Alright, so they're going to Emery back Mishra's Bobble. So they're pretty close to like being able to... Alright, and they're going to Galvanic Blast the Fleshraker. I decided just to cast an X equals 0 Kozilek's command because it'll give us an Eldrazi spawn. You know, you can still draw a card off it, but it's just, you know, you want at least X equals 1 to like really start making things happen. So, going to just do it for X equals 0. I don't know, maybe it's not worth it since we have to use an Ancient Tomb, but just wanted to get, you know, just be mana efficient as possible. So Galvanic Blast takes down Fleshraker, and they're going to pass back to us. And it was probably very tempting for them to use it on the Thought-Knot Seer, but I think that was the correct play for them to shoot down Fleshraker because it just represents a lot of damage and a lot of mana for us. So I'm going to Thought-Knot Seer again, and it's Thought Monitor and Tamiyo. I end up taking Tamiyo because Tamiyo in play can eventually... So it's going to weaken all of our attacks, and it can start buying back Galvanic Blast, which could be like... With all of our Ancient Tombs and One Ring can just kill us really quickly. Like, that's like a really speedy amount of burn. So, that's the reason I took Tamiyo. Didn't want to mess with Tamiyo. It allows us to keep the pressure on them much better. Alright, so they're going to play Chromox just for affinity's sake. And so now, they're going to be able to cast the Thought Monitor. We have Thought-Knot Seers on one side, Thought Monitors on the other side, so everyone's thoughts are being looked at. Alright, they're going to draw their cards. Alright, they're going to get Aether Spellbomb back. I'm going to take this opportunity right here to Kozilek's command. So I've been holding Kozilek's command for this express purpose to nuke something from their graveyard. Now this is a mistake right here, is I was intending to sacrifice the Eldrazi. You could see I'm doing an X equals 1 Kozilek's command because I just want to sacrifice the spawn. However, I click autopay and it uses Ancient Tomb. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, was devastated when that happened. Like, because we're, like, you know, they have some like really potent burn and they could give their flyer haste right now by moving the boots over to the Thought Monitor. And I think the opponent actually missed lethal right there, because if they move the boots onto attack for 3, we get dinged by the ring, and I think that's it. So you could see me agonizing over whether or not to draw with the 1 ring, because if we get up to 4 counters, that means our Ancient Tombs are turned off. We don't have any life gain in this deck. So, but I really wanted to find a way to deal with the ring. Like, we could have Otawara our own ring, but that would have just really sucked. It's much better finding a replacement 1 ring. Fleshraker is super clutch. So we're going to lead with Fleshraker, and then being extra cautious with the mana right here. Don't want to, like, because the auto tapper will Ancient Tomb you when you're on 2 life. You know, so you just got to be really careful. So I'm going to draw 1 last time off the 1 ring. Probably should have just led with that just to have more information. And then going to replace the 1 ring, which is going to trigger Fleshraker, and start chipping some damage at them. Now the opponent is pretty close to dying also, and they are going to... We're trying to force them into a chump box situation. So I'm trying to decide what to pay, because if we pay X equals 0, it's going to stop them from looping Mishra's Baubles. But if we pay X equals 1, it's going to stop future Galvanic Blasts. So I decided to do X equals 1 because that protects us from the burn spells that are like ridiculously low life total right here. So they can have fun with all the zeros they want at the moment. Alright, so going to crash in with the Thought-Knot Seers, and this is basically like a forced chump by them because they don't know if we could fire off like another spell and, you know, kill them. The thing is, we would have to use Ancient Tomb, which would kill us. Wait, no, does Ancient Tomb work through the 1 ring? Oh my gosh, I'm just realizing that right now. I think it deals damage and not life loss, so it would work. Well, that would have made things easier. Still learning, like I said. Alright, I have to discard 4 cards right here, so just pitching some stuff. And this game is just hanging on like a razor's edge right here, because we're almost dead, and the opponent's almost dead. Alright, so then they warp in a Pinnacle Emissary. This is like a super sweet card from Edge of Eternity. So, going to fast forward through this, because the opponent just rips through a ton of artifacts. And basically every artifact cast with Emissary in play creates 1/1 flying artifacts. So the opponent creates like a massive army. So we're like basically dead next turn. The question is, can we fire off enough stuff to kill them with Fleshraker? And this is me, like, I think missing the Ancient Tomb interaction right here. Obviously, I was scared of it right here with the ring protection. I'm trying to decide whether or not to draw off the ring, and I decide, you know, being at 1 or 2 life doesn't matter because either way, we can't use the Ancient Tombs at this point. Alright, so opponent's going to crack Bauble with our ring damage on the stack. And so it's basically now or nothing at this point. The opponent has a lot of blockers. One thing to note is that the artifact tokens can only block flyers. So we can, just attacking with our creatures, deal a minimum of 2 damage with Fleshraker and the 2 Thought-Knot Seers being chumped, you know. However, it seems like we have enough to go all the way, because we're going to use Warping Wail to create a creature, which gives us a bonus Fleshraker trigger, and then going to evoke Nulldrifter to get another Fleshraker trigger, and this is the magic number that they need to fall to, and yeah, the opponent has seen enough. We'll move on to the next game. Alright, another Chalice hand. My opponent leads on Forest. So the question is, like, do we just strip mine the Forest, or go for turn 1 Chalice? Decide just to go for turn 1 Chalice, hoping to really lock out some stuff. Let's see what the opponent has. And the opponent has a strip mine. And so that's the risk of running Ugin's Labyrinth, because, you know, you can power out some stuff, but then you're like super exposed to strip mine. So I'm gonna play a Labyrinth and not tuck anything and move on. We're just trying to desperately get some mana at this point. Outland Liberator is super annoying because it means they can pop Chalice at their leisure if it survives, you know. So not really drawing any lands here, so I'm gonna play Strip Mine and just play it that Heralds the end and pass. Not feeling amazing about the situation. The opponent has another Strip Mine. Not loving that. Now here's a card I hadn't seen before. This is Wary Zone Guard. So it's an alchemy like Duskborn card. It enters tapped and has survival. So basically it has automatic survival on turn 1. And what its survival does is that it brings back a land from your graveyard untapped, and the zone guard gets +1/+1. So it's absolutely cracked with strip mine. So the opponent has basically created like a little strip mine lock with the zone guard right there. So not to mention, because we didn't cast any spells, they get to flip their werewolf, which now can on attack blow up our Chalice. And even though we're a 24 land deck, we're just not drawing any lands. I don't know if it would have been good enough anyway with the zone guard being able to just keep growing and just keep strip mining us. I think we were just toast. And as the opponent puts Scavenging Ooze on the stack, let me know in the comments, how would you build around strip mine? Do you have any plans for it? We're just gonna move on to the next game because we're toast. There's the card, I'm forgetting the whole name, it's like Ice Till something like the insect. It's basically a 1-card strip mine lock. So I am currently working on some decks with that card as well. So I don't know if they're going to restrict strip mine and Timeless. It almost seems like it's like fine, you know, like there's tons of other insane stuff. But if they do restrict it, I want to get as much in as possible, put it that way. So red-black lands from the opponent, and let's see what they do. And I was not expecting this. It's the adventure portion of Decadent Dragon. So they're going to basically like impulse draw 2 cards off our deck. Well, not really impulse draw because they can cast them at their leisure. Going to Kozilek's command just to try and get things moving right here. Gonna create a creature and draw a card. And then I see Chalice of the Void, which normally is really good against both red and black, but it doesn't seem like the opponent's on like that kind of typical strategy. So, not to mention, like, I don't know when I'd like squeeze it in on our curve at any point, you know, like rather probably play like Thought-Knot Seers and stuff. So end up bottoming the Chalice. Alright, going to play a Thought-Knot Seer. And then we see some interesting cards. So double Chandra Hope's Beacon, another Decadent Dragon, and an Outrageous Robbery. So like they're like a theft deck. They're trying to steal cards from the opponent. And probably like deck them by getting like spell copying with Chandra. So I end up taking Decadent Dragon, and I think that is a mistake. I was not examining Chandra closely enough. Because Chandra has like a pretty devastating minus ability that can deal X damage to 2 creatures, not divided, and it comes in with 5 loyalty. So basically it's primed to come into play and blow up 2 Thought-Knot Seers and then stick around. So you could see me contemplating the One Ring and like, no, I could probably, so what I should have done is taken 1 Chandra with each Thought-Knot Seer, and then they would have been a lot more safe from the opponent just like absolutely wrecking us. So I end up taking a Chandra at this point, but it's like too little too late. Not to mention, like, we have much easier means of dealing with creatures. Like Decadent Dragon, we can just Kozilek's command it or trade with it in combat, you know, like, whereas Chandra is like more annoying permanent to deal with. And one thing I also neglected to realize is that when the dragon attacks, it creates a treasure, and so we're already getting Chandra'd right here. And this is the interaction that I was talking about. So this was super avoidable. Like, I just really played poorly. So just by playing Chandra, the opponent's going to kill both their creatures and draw 2 cards for good measure. So that's like a massive blowout right here. Would have loved an It That Heralds the End just to be able to attack into Chandra and like kill it, just to give our Eldrazi spawn some power. As it stands, it could get pretty nasty right now. So we can still hardcast Devour, and I think I make another mistake right here. What I should do is just take out the dragon, because we're only at 8 life, and like I can deal with Chandra later on, you know. With like ancient tombs and stuff, like it doesn't make sense to leave the dragon in play and let it just keep attacking us. And we could have dealt with Chandra later, as nasty as it is. So I think that was another mistake. Alright, so this is from our exile pile. They're going to play a One Ring. And they're deciding, and they end up activating it. So this game was just like frustrating, because I just, especially like in the editing room when I'm editing this game, like, oh man, should have done that different, should have done this different. It just sort of like cascading errors, and then of course we just keep drawing like Ancient Tombs and stuff. Put Ancient Tomb in play just to be more threatening, but this is once again, I believe Ancient Tomb deals damage, and so we would have been safe with Ring Protection to use the... Anyway, that's just super annoying, but opponent's going to play one of our Nulldrifters. It's a learning experience. Alright, so opponent is going to attack with Decadent Dragon. Yeah, just to get the treasure. We have Ring Protection. And at this point, I think there's just nothing we can do. We have 2 lethal flyers to take care of. Okay, well that's not true. We have a 1 ring, so like we're not exactly dead yet. We're mostly dead. And we're going to start with Ugin's Labyrinth to try and generate some more mana. So we're going to stick a Devourer under there. And I'm trying to figure out what exactly we can do. And just being careful with the mana. Once again, like the auto tapper gets a little funky sometimes. So we're going to play it that Heralds the End. And I'm like, alright, basically I think my only hope is to chip in for tons of damage, play a new 1 ring, and then fire off some Kozilek's commands. So we're going to get a new round of Ring Protection. And it's even more agonizing now, realizing that we can just use the Ancient Tombs and have some, you know, generate a ton of creatures, and like, anyway, would have been really strong with it that Heralds the End specifically in play. So opponent has 2 strong attack triggers going off, an Annihilator 1 and a treasure generation. So they're going to crash in, and they're going to strip mine our Ugin's Labyrinth. That's been happening a lot, so that, you know, if you play this deck, be ready to get strip mined on your Ugin's Labyrinths a lot. So, alright, so opponent's going to Brotherhood's End. Neglect or don't use Warping Wail there, and they're going to march down the Devourer, and that's basically it for us. Like, sure, if we draw another 1 ring, we can stave off dying, but we're not going to be exactly winning at this position. So, going to draw for Due Diligence, and it's just not enough. So we'll move on to the next game. Learning experience. All right, this one is an okay hand. So we don't have like any early plays. Let's see what the opponent does. Opens on Inquisition of Kozilek. So, all right, they're going to take Kozilek's command, which makes sense. Kozilek's command getting taken by Inquisition of Kozilek. All right, we're going to start with the turn 1 It That Heralds the End. So the thing is there's not really any good Eldrazi really low on the curve that we have on Arena. So it lends itself more to like this kind of sort of bigger mana deck. But I could see like an Eldrazi aggro deck being a possibility in the future if we get the right ones. So, alright, opponent is just stocked up. So they appear to be like a big mana deck also, like with Torment of Hellfire. They have a bunch of removal. We're going to take the one that gains them life. The removal's not lining up very well with our creatures at the moment. So, they're going to pass. And this is the power of like having all these soul lands in the Eldrazi deck now, because with just on turn 3 we could play double Glaring Fleshraker, you know, just by playing lands. So I decided just to crash with Thought-Knot Seer first in case they had something. They didn't have anything. So we're going to play one Fleshraker, then play the other one right afterwards. And that's going to, you know, you've seen how fast double Fleshraker takes people down. So unless they find like a Toxic Deluge or a Damnation, it's going to get real nasty real quick for them. Let's see what the opponent does. Alright, so they're going to use an Erebos' Intervention. They're going to take down one Fleshraker and buff their life total a little bit, but it just really doesn't seem like it's enough against what we're doing right now. And yeah, going to fire off the 1 ring using Ancient Tomb mana. Fleshraker's going to start doing some stuff. And I'm going to draw off the 1 ring. And this is why you draw before you making, you know, because now the attacks look way better with It That Heralds the End. And I was thinking about holding Warping Wail, but like, no, I'm just going to crash in for like a ton of damage right here because it's an Eldrazi Lord, you know, so can smash in for 9 right here and still hold up Warping Wail like if they rip like a Wrath or something like that, you know. So we have ourselves pretty dang covered at this point in time. Alright, so just to try and get a moral victory, the opponent's going to try and Torment of Hellfire us. We're going to deny them that with Warping Wail and just counter it. So it's also going to deal some consolation damage to them, and then they're just going to eat a massive attack right here. So we're going to draw a Devourer and just crash in and lock up another win. Well, this deck is super fun. I'm really glad to be able to like play Chalice of the Void like full power, turboing them out with Ancient Tombs and stuff like that. I really like this deck. I think there's a lot of good things going, despite me messing up Ancient Tomb under One Ring protection multiple times. There's a lot of good things going on. They have like Kozilek's Command, Glaring Fleshraker, Wombo Combo, and like Nulldrifter to draw cards. There's a lot of cool things going on. It is sort of clunky sometimes. Like we don't have that many low curve spells. So, like there were a lot of times where I was like having a hard time deploying everything. Like everything costs like 4 or 7 mana. Would love to build like an Eldrazi aggro deck. Like we really would need like Endless One on Arena, which we don't have right now. I was even looking at stuff like 3-tree Mascot, like to possibly have 2 drops, you know. But this is like strictly colorless though. Like if you dip into other colors, then you can have more Eldrazi 2 drops. But leaning colorless, there's like not really much to choose from. And the most notable exclusion is Soaring Mycospawn, especially because of how cracked it is with soul lands and strip mines and stuff like that. But I just really didn't have that many like colored sources. Like you could see I only have 7, you know, if you count Gemstone, 8 for Nulldrifter, you know, but that has like an alternative like colorless cost, you know. So I feel like Soaring Mycospawn is much better if you can like turbo it out, and so you need way more green sources than we have access to. Like you might even have to ditch the whole Ugin's Labyrinth package to have enough green sources. But I could see an Eldrazi deck that dips into green that really utilizes that to a good measure. Sire of 7 Deaths is like another one you can possibly put in there as like a huge whammy card that's you can stuff under a Chalice. Crucible can be considered. You know, there's a lot of things. Like it's just sort of there's a lot of options right now. One that I was also thinking about is Sanctum of Ugin, because like it works really well with like Nulldrifter and Devourer. You can sacrifice it to grab stuff. But I think in this strip mine meta, like mana is such a premium. I don't think you exactly want to be sacrificing lands to like basically draw a card. Like you could sort of just power out One Rings and do, you know, draw cards off Kozilek's Command and just end up much better like that. So, but yeah, there's a lot to consider, but I think it's a fun strategy, and that's the deck. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see even more nonsense, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Your engagement with the channel helps me know what the people want. Thank you.